year or so ago, I did a post on which language is easier and what might be easier to learn first in terms of the Romance languages I knew. Well, I know another one now, kinda, so let's update it with Italian, French, Spanish and Portuguese. And just to be clear, I'm talking about learning from English, although some things might be appropriate for those whose first language is not English, and this is purely my opinion. Yours may differ. I'm going to tackle it a little differently this time though. I'm going to split it into 3 sections over 3 separate months. 1. Easiest to pronounce. 2. Closest to English in terms of cognates, etc. And 3. Grammar. The same language might not be at the top of each list. You'll have to wait and see. So today, it's pronunciation. Which of these 4 languages is easiest to pronounce for someone starting their first foreign language? Yes, that does make a difference. Well, the first thing to say is that all foreign languages have combinations of letters that are difficult to say. Those you just have to learn. You have to get your mouth used to saying them. But there are elements that confuse things even more. That's what we'll be exploring here. For me, there is only one choice for first place on the easiest to pronounce leaderboard. I believe Spanish is the easiest of these 4 languages to pronounce for an English-speaking person. Why? Spanish is strict on how each letter or combination of letters is pronounced, unlike English. Yes, there are different pronunciations in Europe and Latin America, and there are accents. But once you know the pronunciation that you will be using, the standard pronunciation, that will always be correct. You might say that's the same with any language. Yes, true to a certain extent. But if we take English, for example, there are lots of different ways to say the same combination of letters. But let's get a little more specific. Spanish vowels have only one pronunciation. There are not open and closed variations for the same vowel. Now, if you're learning your first language, you might not even know that this is a thing. But it is, believe me. And Spanish is much easier because it just has 5 vowel sounds. Now let's talk about stress. Spanish requires an accent if stress is not following the rules. Yes, you will have to learn the rules. But that's, again, true for all languages. But after you do that, you should be in no doubt as to where stress lies in any word. As opposed to another language that I'm not going to shame here, I'll do that in a few minutes. So, if easy pronunciation is the most important thing for you, then Spanish could be the language to go for. Second, and this is probably going to be a surprise for some, I'm going to put French. Now, French has a lot of pronunciations that are different from English. I'm not going to deny that. But because of France's proximity to the UK, we hear a lot of French in everyday life. Everything from news reports to tourists, etc. Also, most of us will have learned some French at school, thus giving it another thing that makes us more familiar with the sound of the language and therefore makes it easier for us to pick up if we decide to try languages again at a later stage. So although we're talking about first languages here, I'm not including abandoned as a failure language learning from school. If you're not from the UK, this may not be true for you. The different sounds, I think, are more difficult than those in Spanish. And there are more of them, which is why it has to come second, even if you did learn some of it at school. Second, French does have a lot of accents, which help with pronunciation when it differs from the norm. That, of course, might be a down in another area. These accents change the sound of vowels. The vowels of which there are some 16. Some of them nasal. Yeah, that's a lot of vowel sounds. This is going to be a thing going forward. But the fact that French uses so many accents makes knowing which vowel sounds are which a bit easier. What about stress? Stress is also a bit more confusing in French if you think about it, but I don't feel you really do need to think about it. Syllables are pretty much stressed equally, but you might get a bit of emphasis at the end of a phrase, which will tend to be at the end of a word. French is a very even-sounding language. Third, Italian or Portuguese? This is probably a toss-up, honestly. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. They both have sounds that are pretty difficult for English speakers to master. I think, though, as this is purely pronunciation, Italian might have the edge. There are some really confusing things for English speakers about Italian, not just the extra difficult pronunciations. For example, the chi, che and chi, che sounds which are back to front for us. This really did my head in when I was first learning Italian. You get over it eventually, but it is quite a difficult hurdle to jump. There are also double letters which are technically pronounced as double letters, which for some letters is fine. You can pronounce a double L as a longer letter, but for others it ends up being a kind of a pause beforehand. Again, you can get used to it, but it just feels awkward when you start. Italian has 5 vowels, but more vowel sounds. O and E can be pronounced as an open or a closed vowel depending on the word. This makes it more difficult because, again, you just have to learn these. But that's not the only difficult thing about vowels. It's the strings of vowels one after the other that can be even more difficult. There can be as many as 4 in a row, such as cucchiaio, the word for a spoon. There are apparently some words with more consecutive vowels, but those aren't common, so we'll ignore them. What about accents and stress and all that? Italian doesn't have a lot of accents. Sometimes they indicate stress, or they might just be to differentiate 2 words with the same spelling, and occasionally they indicate a different vowel sound. But when it comes to stress in general, you're on your own. There is a basic rule of stress the penultimate syllable, but there are a lot of words which don't follow this, and you just have to learn them. And poor old Portuguese is bringing up the rear. Why is Portuguese here? Well, I find the sound of Portuguese very alien to my ear. It is quite difficult when you first start hearing it from a native speaker to make out any of the words. So the sounds of the letters are very different, and quite different from European to Brazilian Portuguese too. There are a lot of nasal sounds and what sound like slurred S's at the end of words, and the ends of words are frequently cut off completely. That's just a small selection of the differences. You would think Portuguese would sound similar to Spanish or Italian, but it doesn't at all, at least not to me. So this alone makes it the most difficult in my eyes, but let's look at the other elements. Accents and stress. Portuguese has a lot of accents. Some of these denote stress, others pronunciation, and others both. And one is for clarity. So like Spanish, if a word doesn't follow the rules, it needs a stress accent. As I've said, some of those accents denote sound. There are 12 vowel sounds in Portuguese, and 5 of those are nasal. But they also have open and closed vowels to deal with. But because there are so many accents and so many variations, this, I think, makes Portuguese more difficult too. So that's if you were learning these languages as a first language, or as a second language. But what about if you were learning a second foreign language, which would be easier then? After Spanish, I would go for either French or Portuguese, because Italian pronunciation is very close to Spanish and could cause confusion. It has for me. After French, I'd say any are okay, because French sounds so different from all the others that you're equally as likely to confuse or not confuse them. After Italian, I'd say French, because both Spanish and Portuguese have things you might easily confuse in the pronunciation. After Portuguese, French would be the least confusing, even though they share some sounds, but the language as a whole is very different. I don't think there would be any confusion there. But having said that, from a sound pronunciation only perspective, you might be okay with both Spanish and Italian too. Come back next month to hear about cognates.